The two procurement nerds are back. Dr. E, where in the world are you today? Are you Oakland, Vegas, Europe?
I'm in Vegas today and it's cooking here. It's pretty hot, but I'm enjoying a little time in the desert, which is one of my happy places.
I was telling our special guest before you got on that in the Bay Area yesterday, I think it got up to 105. I haven't been outside today, but it is so hot. Hence, I'm in white and you can't wear a lot of clothes here right now. So I'm assuming Vegas is even warmer.
Oh yeah, but it was 105 here yesterday. Do you have air conditioning?
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Oh yeah. We definitely. I don't envy the people in Europe who have been going through the heat wave and have no AC.
Yeah, they've been going through it.
So we are making an exception to our usual pod format. And instead of Dr. E and I just talking through a topic, we actually decided we wanted to have our second ever guest come on the show. And this is extra special for me. Our guest, Heather Foch, is actually one of my industry besties. And her and I have probably been on, 15, 17 trips together. Lots of girls' fun trips, couples trips, and industry trips. And she is also known to many of you as the Toner Queen. And she has these awesome outfits that she wears with crowns embroidered. And are you wearing a crown right now?
Not today. No, I am going incognito.
She's incognito today.
Well, and you have been a topic on our show a number of times when we've talked about conferences. So
yes, I wish I appreciate the highlight reels I get.
So, Dr. E, before we have Heather do a formal intro, let's share what we're going to be talking about today. Again, we've never done a show quite like this.
This is going to be about the logistics of dog rescues, and those that know me know that I'm a big dog lover. We have 4 dogs, and we're about to foster maybe a 5th, and perhaps even a 6th. That's a whole nother issue. But which is great because Heather, I know you're a printer toner person, and I've said very publicly that I hate printers. I've been working my entire life to avoid printers because I go back to like old school dot matrix.
Or like the thermal.
The thermal, yeah. Too. So I just can't stand. By the way, could you buy a dot matrix cartridge? Do people buy those?
Well, it's actually ribbons, and you know what industry still uses a lot even today is car dealerships.
Ah, yeah.
All of their contracts are still done on dot matrix, and there's still some thermal machines by Brother that are like thermal faxes, and I'm like, why are these still in existence? But they don't die, so they're still around. It's been like 20 years. I'm like, why aren't these dead yet? But
oh my god! All right, enough. That's as much printer talk as I can handle. But
random side note, somebody asked me like 2 or 3 weeks ago if we had a fax number, and I was like, I'm not even answering that. I'm moving.
I'm sorry, it's not 1988.
Yeah, seriously, like the 80s called, and
yeah,
like there's a lot of retro coming back, but fax machines are not one of them.
No.
Oh my god, printers! I forgot about those. Anyway, we're about to talk about Italian Greyhounds, or Iggies for short, which are one of my favorite breeds, even though I don't have one. And we were joking beforehand that I might adopt one by the end of this episode. Who knows? But anyway, and Sarah had mentioned that you are involved with rescues and Italian Greyhound rescues. And so I thought, what a great opportunity to talk to somebody about the logistics and sort of procurement elements of dog rescues, and at the same time sort of talk about and promote adopting. So with that, Sarah?
Yeah. So Heather, before we jump in, let's have you do a quick intro because again, I think a lot of people know you as the toner queen. So maybe a quick blurb on your role in the procurement and supply chain space, and then would love to hear, and I don't even know if I know the full story around how you got into dog rescue.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as everyone, probably knows me by, is the toner queen. I run a company called Quality Imaging Solutions, and I've been doing that for about 23 years now already. And we focus on sustainable and ethical sourcing of printer hardware and printer supplies, parts for desktop office equipment. So we've got customers that are in pretty much every industry, also on the FedGov and local state level side as well with government. And we love what we do. So if anyone has a question, feel free to reach out. I've been very grateful to have been involved with such a great organization. So we're officially our rescue. It's a national 501c3, and it's called the Italian Greyhound Rescue Foundation, or IGRF for short. It was maybe about 10 years into that they were like, hey, we're starting to see dogs showing up in small local shelters or being sold. And back then it was all in print. So it was like Penny Saver and all those kind of print little things you'd get in the mail or in the paper. And breeders around the country were starting to see Italian Greyhounds showing up, being sold or just being given away. And we didn't have a national rescue. So they kind of sponsored IGRF to form, and we got our 501, and we operate out of every state. So we have coverage with different kinds of volunteers in every state, so we can kind of manage things a little bit. I couldn't do what I do remote, especially being remote, if I didn't have like my boots on the ground volunteers, if I didn't have a great network. So it's all because of them. I'm just kind of like the puppet master a little bit, like managing things in the back end, but they do all the heavy lifting. So I would say that that's my primary, is like making sure that we have a great volunteer base for different activities. And then my job becomes easier.
So when I think of a dog rescue, I picture someone saving a dog and then finding it this perfect little white picket fence home. But there is a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. What kind of happens at a high level from start to finish when the main steps when a dog enters the rescue all the way through the adoption and then after? Maybe just kind of walk us through logistically what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So we take in, I would say, at least in my Ohio State and Michigan State areas, we take in probably 70% of the dogs that come into our region are owner surrenders. And there's a variety of different life changes that happen with people. And so it's never really one specific thing or another, the reason why they're coming in. I would say I'm thankful when and I'll explain why I say it this way. I'm thankful that it's an emotional decision for them for the most part, because they're going through something really difficult and challenging in their life. Might be a divorce, or they lost a job, or all sorts of number of things. And it's hard for them, but at the end of the day, they are doing it for the benefit of the dog. They're not being selfish and thinking of themselves, right? So they're putting their dog first and making sure their dog is ending up in a good place, right? Very rarely we end up with people who literally just like drop the dog and leave and we never hear from them again. But for the most part, a lot of the surrendering owners, it's emotional, and we want it to be like their decision, right? So we tell them everything what to expect from the surrender process on as far as being a surrendering owner goes, so they know what to expect. And then I tell owners, if you ever want an update on your dog, email me, send me a text, and I'll let you know how your dog is doing, like post surrender. Because for a lot of people, and this is why I'm thankful, their dogs are their kids. And so to surrender their pet, their loved one, their family member, it's such a traumatic kind of experience. And so I will update people as often as they want. And I've got surrendering owners who surrendered like 5+ years ago who still occasionally reach out to me asking for an update, and I'm happy to provide one. I never share. We keep our volunteers and our adopters private, but
Yeah.
I can easily get a photo. Here they are with their new family. Here they are with this. Here they are on a walkie. Like all, and it just makes them feel better. So if I can do that and let them know, like, hey, they made a good decision and their dog ended up in a great place, and they can still make sure that the dog is still doing well. That makes their decision actually a little bit easier instead of just going like cold turkey.
Yeah.
So from start to finish, I would say we get dogs in, and again, we do actually work with local shelters too. I should also point out. So humane societies, county shelters, SPCA. Italian Greyhounds don't really do well in a shelter situation with the number of volume of dogs that they have. It's noisy, and their anxiety levels kind of go through the roof. So a lot of times we'll do shelter transfers, and they'll just transfer ownership essentially from them to us if they get any in. But for the most part, when we get a dog in, we are trying to get as much info as we can about its personality and any behaviors it has, good or bad. Because what that helps us do is match them with the right foster home. So let's say a dog is going to come in and maybe they had a bad experience with a cat, or maybe they have a high prey drive. And so being in a home with cat probably wouldn't be the best thing.
Or kids, or they're afraid of men.
Exactly. He's afraid of big dogs, and I just place them in a home with a big dog. Like doing all those sorts of things, like just getting a dog into a space instead of like really taking the time to match, means either it's going to be harder for the foster home, it's going to be harder on the dog to acclimate and kind of de-stress, and it's going to be harder for them to really deal with any kind of other behavior issues. Like if you've got separation anxiety, you need leash walk training, or you need crate training. If you're already setting a dog kind of up for failure, or the foster home up for failure, it becomes a much more difficult situation. So we try and do the best that we can with matching even with our foster homes, just so it's kind of easier on everybody.
And do you use any technology for that? Like you have any sort of like, I don't know, your version of ProcureTech, a system that's actually tracking and managing and helping with the matching?
And also I want to add, can you expand, because like what you just described is a vast amount of data.
It is, yeah.
So if you could like integrate those two into an answer.
Yeah, absolutely. So tech-wise, my regions, Ohio and Michigan, are, I would say, only 20% of all of the dogs that our whole rescue takes in. We have one region on the East Coast, rather. We call it our Mid-Atlantic, and that rep manages about 10 states up and down the East Coast. Texas is actually is on its own. They actually split it into two, north and south, because it's so big geographically. But those three regions, and California is also another big one for us. They handle much more volume. So like I know one year, and this was pre-COVID, Texas took in 80 dogs in a year, and I would never see that volume where I'm at. So for me, I used to use Google Docs and Google Sheets to manage things. So I've got all of my volunteer data, all of our dog data, all of our application, whether they were approved or denied, what was the reason, those sorts of things. Our National Rescue also has a database through Yahoo, where I know, but it works for them. But it lets us, the database there, we keep track of do not adopt people, so that everyone nationally, because we're all broken out into regions, right? So we'll sometimes see people apply to California, and then let's say they get denied, and they'll try applying to our other regions to try and get approved. And so we keep a national database for that. So for me, I just use Google Drive, basically all the apps within Google Drive. I use Google Voice so that I'm not using my personal information. We've got a kind of a generic email address, so it's not personally attached to me, because whenever I eventually retire, I want everything just to pass on to the next person, so they have access to all of that stuff. That was one thing that as a whole our rescue started doing maybe 5 years ago. Everything was very paper based. When I took over working with Gulf Coast, for example, they had one volunteer who was retired, and she lived part-time in Georgia and part-time in Florida, like 6 months and 6 months. And she would literally, people would mail her their applications in the mail. And then
It's almost as bad as a fax, someone asking for a
Oh,
fax
yeah.
number.
So she had like, I don't know, like 10 file folder boxes of all of these applications, and then like she had copies of approved adoption agreements that she just kept, that she'd been doing for like 10 years. She just kept it all. And when she would go from house to house, she'd bring it with her. So she had everything, instead of making 2 copies, she just would bring it from. And I'm like, what if you're in an accident? All of that data is gone. Like, we don't have any information. So that was the first thing I did with Gulf Coast. Like, and this was back, like I said, like 2012, when I got up to Washington, was we got them all online. And I moved all of our applications from paper to, we use, Google Forms for all our applications. And there are some other areas, like I mentioned, Texas and our Mid-Atlantic regions, that have much more volume. So they, because they have a higher volume of dogs, and thus a higher volume of people that they're dealing with, and paper and that kind of stuff, or, applications, they do use different databases that they pay for, to manage all of it. And it manages everything down to vet care and like vet billing and that kind of stuff. So because I don't do that much in volume per year as those ones do, it's just handled internally, and using Google Docs and Google Sheets and that kind of stuff. Because it's not a terrible amount of work.
What is your volume?
Gosh, pre-COVID, we were probably bringing in maybe 20 to 25 dogs a year.
Okay.
And it kind of goes in waves, like over the summer, and when the weather is nice, because one thing Italian Greyhounds are notoriously known for is being hard to potty train. And so when it comes wintertime, right, and in Ohio it snows, and they might not see, it could be snowy for months out there. So we would see an uptick of people surrendering because they kind of just got to their wits' end with recurring potty training every year with their dog, and then just got to the point where they couldn't handle it anymore. And so we would see higher uptick like in the fall all the way through like January or February. And then once the weather warmed up, we'd have a little bit of a lull, and then it would pick up again. Like as kids get out of school and families are going on vacation, they would surrender like before trips and stuff would happen. So we kind of see this weird, and it kind of happens every year. So it's this kind of cyclical seasonality, I guess, that we would notice, which is kind of funny, but yeah.
So how do you manage, so you've got a surrender, you intake all the information. How do you manage the actual matching piece to say, okay, this dog is going to work well in this home? And then what does that look like after the dog gets, I don't know what the word is, is it sent
to
away?
The foster home, basically?
Yeah.
Like how all the intake stuff. So once I do the matching part of it, and I've been doing this for 12 years or whatever now, 15 years almost. I've been doing Ohio for almost a decade. So I know my volunteers really, especially my foster home volunteers, really, really well, including like what their pets' personalities are like, what their kids are like, if they've got kids, what their activity like is in the home. Are they super active family, or are they a super active person, or are they maybe older and retired, or does someone work from home so they've got a little bit more time at home available? So I kind of take those things into consideration when I'm getting a surrender request. I'm like, oh, okay, here's the baseline of what the owner has kind of told us, what the dog, what it's doing and what it's like, and then I know, based on my charting, in our Google Sheets, of what foster homes are good for certain dogs. And then I also kind of look at geographically, because we cover the whole state. So I've got volunteers in Ohio, for example, pretty much from the north, from like, what's the area called over there? Like Sandusky, all the way to the eastern part as we get closer to Pennsylvania. I've got a ton of volunteers all in and around Columbus. I've got some in the Dayton area and then some in Cincinnati. So it allows us to kind of be able to foster almost anywhere in the state, which is great. So I also try and look at, do I have a foster home that's a match that is closest to the dogs? And that just means less transport work that we have to do. But sometimes, I've got a certain dog coming in, because one also aspect of our foster homes is they might have their own preferences too, right? Of what kind of dog they know that they're able to handle. So I've got homes who love puppies and love the younger dogs, and young Italian Greyhounds are like death-defying acrobats that have no fear. So, and they're wild. They're like Tasmanian devil wild children. And so you've got to have a home who understands that energy level. And so I wouldn't place a younger dog in a home that has senior dogs, because their energy levels are so night and day, like that it would just be a terrible experience for everyone, including the dogs. So I've got homes who like the younger dogs because they have younger dogs. And so I'll match younger dogs with those homes. And then I've got a couple homes who are, bless their hearts, they love the hospice dogs, or they love seniors. And so they only get hospice and senior dogs. And I've got some who love taking in, like if we get a bonded pair, we try and keep bonded pairs together. So I've got homes that are great with bonded pairs. And some who are like, not necessarily hospice, but maybe there's something medical going on and they're really great with getting dogs to vets, even if it's multiple times a week for something like a broken leg or something like that. Then, I've got homes for that. So there's a lot of different things that kind of tick off who would make a good home of, foster home for somebody. Cause we're thinking about all those little things. How close are they to our vets? Is it going to be, if we know there's going to be a lot of vet visits, is that going to be a pain in the butt for them? Or, is their vet 10, 15 minutes away and it's not a bad drive for them? So there's a lot of things we take into consideration when doing matching, but once we do, then we finalize plans with the owner. And most of the time I try and plan them for either a volunteer is coming to their home to pick up the dog, or if there's a little bit distance between the foster home and the surrendering owner, I will find a safe public place for them to both drive to and meet at. And for the most part, I don't have foster homes do the surrender intake and meet owners, because we've had instances where owners get weird in a variety of different ways. I can go into that more later, or not. But so I try and that just gives our foster home some privacy and a little bit of a break. So I have a transport volunteer. So I have volunteers who all they want to do is transports because they love to drive. And I'll have them be the intermediary. That way, once the transport's done, the only contact that owners have is through me, and I can kind of field some of the inquiries and because usually the first few days, they're wanting to know how they're doing every hour, making sure they made the right decision. So I take on that, so that our foster homes aren't being overloaded, with messages.
You're like a therapist and a recruiter, Heather, all in one.
It's a lot. It can be a lot sometimes. Thankfully, all of that kind of stuff I mentioned is sort of rare, like having the weird surrendering owner. That's very rare, but it does happen. So I just set it up this way. So like, this is how we do it. So it just doesn't matter if they're weird or not. Everyone goes through the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed at how much data you collect on the different households, and because for us, we do senior and hospice, and we do bond and pairs or special needs, but the rescues that we kind of adopt from or foster with aren't that nearly that sophisticated, like orders of magnitude, not that sophisticated.
And it's hard. It's hard sometimes, but I think because I've just been doing it so long, this is just what I have found what works. And when I've got a surrendering owner that's maybe really anxious, what would make me feel better if I was in their situation is, knowing that their dog is still in a good place. Like, so that's why I say, if you ever want an update, just let me know. Like, I'm happy to provide one. Cause I would die probably if I ever was in a situation where I had to give up one of my own dogs. Like, oh my
God,
I would live in I would live in my car before I would give up a dog. Like,
same.
but it can be hard. So we work with, our transport volunteers, and they go ahead and drop off at our foster home. And if we aren't able to get, previous vet records, vet history, from the vet, from the previous owner, then we just treat them as if they need the works. So our rescue fully pays for all of vet care.
And Heather, that brings up another interesting topic around this, is the whole financial piece behind it. So I would love to understand the cost, like what is the cost breakdown of something like this, and then who's paying for it? Because I think that maybe sometimes people assume that the rescue is paying for everything, but I'm assuming the person who's taking on the dog has a pretty big financial investment, in this as well, supporting a dog, especially if there's medical or special needs.
Yeah, so post-adoption, for sure, the owner is taking on whatever's going on. So, senior dogs usually have like thyroid problems, so they might be on thyroid meds, or they need eye drops for glaucoma, or battling glaucoma and that kind of stuff. And so the owner would fully take over those sorts of things. Any future dentals, they might need, that sort of stuff. But our rescue does pay for everything. So we do a lot of fundraising in a lot of different ways. We have one person who's on our rescue committee who is solely dedicated to writing grants. So that we can, because Petco and most of the dog food companies, they all have programs where they will donate to 501s. So we have someone who just solely, that's their job day in and day out, is to write grants, applications. And then we get personal donations from people too throughout the year. You can donate via PayPal or Venmo, and then directly, via check or something like that too. And then all of our adoption fees go straight into that same fund. So all the money, because we're all 100% volunteers, so none of us get paid. So every single dollar that comes in is solely used for the vet care for the dogs that we have. I will say we are always in the red on a dog, but because we fundraise so much, we've got the funds available. I mean, like, I could tell you a couple quick stories. We had one little girl come in with a broken back leg, which that was an abuse thing we figured out later. But that was a $3,500 surgery to repair that broken leg. And broken legs in general can cost like $3,000 to $5,000 or a bit more, depending on where they are in the country. Ohio is pretty reasonable price, but if you go East or West Coast, it's much more expensive for vet care. So it just kind of depends on where they're at. We had one little girl come in, and she probably, as far as my region is concerned, has been the most expensive dog. She's our $10,000 dog. We took her in as a shelter transfer from a shelter we work with a lot, and we figured it out that there was probably a puppy mill in that area, because we'd gotten in like 4 or 5 dogs in 6 months as a transfer from that same shelter, and we're like, they were all picked up as strays. So we're thinking someone is just letting dogs out, but they were breeding because it was so many of them, and they all kind of looked alike. So we're like, this is from one place. Yeah. Well, one little girl came in, and I think she's maybe 4 now. So I think she was 3 at the time. And everything seemed normal within a couple of hours of her being at our foster home, who, thank the Lord, she had this insight into this. She's a physician in an ER. So she's very in tune to medical emergencies, right? Like, she knows what's an emergency, what's not. So she gets home, and a couple of hours later, she's noticing like bruising on her abdomen, on the dog's abdomen. We're like, oh, and she's like, that wasn't there when I picked her up. So I'm like, well, just keep an eye out, like mark on her belly to see if it's spreading or not. And we'll know kind of more there. So like another hour goes by, and yeah, the bruising was surpassing the marked areas that she had, highlighted on her tummy. Wow. We get her over to the vet, the vet, because it was a Sunday, of course, like they always are, emergencies. And she ended up being diagnosed with something called ITP. And I had to Google what it stands for.
I don't know what it is.
Like, I don't know what it is either.
It's let me go look it up real quick, because it's pretty interesting. Here we go. It's called ITP, is immune mediated thrombocytopenia. And in dogs, it's a life-threatening autoimmune where the immune system attacks and destroys its own platelets. So basically, her body was destroying her platelets and like red blood cells. And so the bruising wasn't necessarily real bruising. It was just,
Mhm.
you know,
A
the
side
result
effect.
of her. Yeah. And so we immediately had to go and start doing treatment for her. But it's very expensive, right? We have to do like the blood transfusions and different meds that will different levels of steroids to try and combat, you know, what's happening to what our body's doing to itself. Basically, I think she was hospitalized for like 3 or 4 days. And we specifically did a fundraiser just for her because the initial estimate came in at like 6 grand, but over the time that she was with us, I think it probably cost us 10 grand for everything from start to finish, because we had to then, once she was stabilized and she got discharged and went to her foster home, it was probably 8 months of weaning her off of the steroids, which took, yeah, almost a year to do. And then of course her foster family ended up adopting her. So we base our adoption fees based on a couple of things: the age of the dog and like its medical health. So younger dogs, I think dogs around 6 months go for 350. When they get to be about a year, it goes to 325. Any dog between 2 and 8 years is 300, and then any dog over 8, regardless, is 275. So that's why when I say we're always in the red, because we are, because we never take in, you know, we always are paying more to get a dog. All the vet care they need is way more than what we're getting for their adoption fee.
Yeah.
But I think that's true for a lot of rescues. That's why everyone's doing so much fundraising and whatnot.
So my most recent adoptee, or one of them, is a bloodhound, and she had a broken arm in 2 places, and she had an issue with her neck, but her broken leg. It cost like 12 grand, 10 grand, or 12 grand to fix it.
Oh yeah.
And so we fostered her, and I had to take her to the vet, which will get to my question, but the vet was like half an hour, actually it was 40 minutes away, and each way. And I did that for 12 weeks or 10 weeks or something. I can't remember the details. And that's, of course, I fell in love with her, you know, taking her up because she was so great. But I remember them doing a GoFundMe, and I wrote a thing for the rescue to, you know, like a few months later when she was doing really well. And the dog now, you wouldn't even know she had anything wrong with her, and she's just funny and a huge bundle of joy.
Yeah.
My question is, though, because how do you procure vet services, and do you get a discount? Because this is a question I've been dying to know, just sort of in general, because my assumption with the rescue we work with locally is, we don't even really work with them all that often, but just that we've gotten our dogs from, they have this agreement with the clinic, and they must pay just a fraction of what we do as like consumers or regular retail, because we actually had brought one of our dogs there, and what we paid was, I don't know what we paid for Annie when she came in, but because I didn't have to deal with that as a foster. However, what we paid, like, well, and at one point we had 6 dogs, so our vet bills are astronomical, to say nothing of emergency vet bills. So I guess what I'm trying to ask in a really long-winded way is like, how do you negotiate or do something to keep your vet costs down?
I am, again, like with my volunteer base, I'm very thankful to the vets that we work with. So each rep is kind of responsible for forming relationships with vets, kind of based on where their foster homes are, right? We want to make it convenient for the foster home and not have to drive, 40 minutes or an hour somewhere. So we try and find somewhere close. And actually kind of where I've found what works, where I start is if the foster home has their own pets, where have they gone to take their own pets, right? Because then now they already know the practice, they already know the
Mhm.
doctors. They already they obviously are going there because it's probably convenient to where they live, those sorts of things. So I'll usually start with, if I don't have one in the area, I'll start with what vet are they using. And then I just reach
Mhm.
out to the business manager. Most of the part, it's a business manager, office manager, but running the business, who will then talk to the practice owner and I just lay out our case like, hey, we're a national 501. We've got foster homes in your area now, and we're looking for another vet or an additional vet to help us serve, this community. Do you give rescue discounts? And as long as rescues are a true 501, I've always had to give copies of our certificate to our vets. They, for the most part, will give us a discount. I think the most we get is maybe 25%. And some will give us like 10 or 15% off of products, like if we need prescription food or heartworm medication, that kind of stuff, any of that routine kind of stuff, they'll give us discounts on that stuff too. And then I have some who are very generous when it comes to surgical stuff. So like, let's say it's a dental that's coming in and the mouth looks terrible. They'll do the dental x-rays for free.
Mhm.
Or they'll run the pre-surgical blood work, which is just like a CBC. They'll do that part for free. Or they'll do heartworm stuff for free, like the testing and all that kind of stuff. All that stuff goes out to a lab. So I'm very thankful that I've been able to negotiate, but it also means like as a rescue, you've got to pay your doctors on time, right? So I'm thankful that
Yeah.
most of the vets I work with in Ohio and Michigan give us net terms. So that gives me a chance to get invoiced from them, make sure the billing is correct. I send it up to a coordinator who handles billing for the entire rescue. And then she sends that out when it's been cleared by her, then she sends it to our treasurer who is in Massachusetts, and then she physically cuts the check and mails it. So it's about a 2-week lead time. But as long as they're getting paid, then it's fine. I do work with a couple of vets in Ohio and one in Michigan where they want to get paid at the time of service, because
Right.
they've been burned by rescues before. So, and they still give us a discount, but they want to get paid. So in those instances, and I'm very grateful to be fortunate financially. So when an instance like that comes in, I'll go ahead and just pay it so they get paid, and then I get reimbursed by rescue, and it's the same, couple week process or whatever. But I've never been stiffed ever, and none of our vets have ever been stiffed. I'm very thankful to that for that, so that we're financially healthy. Because it's one thing, we don't want to be spending so much money that we're losing sight
Yeah.
of what our goals are, or that we're spending so much and not realizing, oh, we spent too much and now we don't have money for bills we have coming in. Our rescue treasurer and that whole like finance committee is very conscious of all of that. And they keep us updated on like where we're at, funding wise and that kind of stuff. But again, that's why we have so many different avenues for fundraising, so that there's always money coming in. I have some people who donate and then they do the company match donations
Mhm.
too. So some of our volunteers do that as well. So
I want to ask, like, sort of two related. So just or clarify. So you have a whole like invoice comes in and sort of matching approval, whatnot, process to for payments. Is that correct?
yes, exactly. And our
Yeah.
vets know like what we will and won't pay for. So they won't, not that they sneak something in there, but like some vets will, oh, if you're here for a surgery, we'll do a nail trim for free. So they won't charge us for nail trims. But if we brought the dog in for like vaccine updates and a nail trim was done, then they would bill us for that. So I'm always like, well, let's do a nail trim, but let's do it when I know it's going to be free, because the animal's knocked out.
Yeah.
And so they can do a nail trim really
Yeah.
fast. So
Right.
I'll usually, we communicate really well together too. So we know here's what the dog needs. Here's what we'll pay for. And we've been working together for years. So I'm very thankful that because of our good communication and relationship we've built together, that I haven't run into an issue where there was any billing issues or anything like that, thankfully. So, and we work with small practices that are that do specialty. And then in Ohio, there's a big company called MedVet, and they own, I think, like
Mhm.
10 or a dozen practices all over Ohio, and they do have emergency services too. So we've got accounts with them, And so anytime we get anything overnight or, a serious medical, veterinary emergency, then we take dogs to them, and they're awesome.
I am that which now I have two. So one question is, what are your other major expenses? Food gets mostly donated, and vets are a major expense. What is your other expenses? And then I'll just state that, make this comment before you answer that. The like MedVet owning 10 different ERs or vet emergencies. One of the things that we as pet owners have been watching is private equity's absolute gobbling up of all the vets,
yeah.
and it's an epidemic. And anyway,
it really is. Well, like VCA is really big everywhere too.
Yep.
Blue Pearl is another one. They bought out 2 specialty clinics on the east side in Washington State, outside of Seattle. But yeah, MedVet is definitely one of those kind of practices. And I have a lot of customers that are also in the dental space, and so they're dental service, they're DSOs, dental service organizations. So any managed service organization, whether it be vet or whether it be dental or med spa, they're really getting into med spa too. If there's money, private equity will start investing. So veterinary is definitely one that I've been noticing this change probably over the last decade. I started seeing it in Florida a lot, and then I guess it was started just heading out west. There's a huge, I think it's Aspen Dental is like a huge DSO. I think they have like 1,200 clinics or something everywhere. They actually have a veterinary side of their business too, because I think it was the same thing. It was like rinse and repeat. We can do the same process and just multiply,
Yep.
So yeah, it's that's kind of sad, because then it also becomes kind of corporate,
Yeah.
and decision making kind of gets taken away from the vets that maybe opened the practice originally, and now it's all up to corporate, that kind of stuff. So it is kind of sad, but it's kind of the way of the world these days when it comes to investment opportunities by private equity, which I don't like very much, but it is what it is.
We won't go delving too much further down that, but
yeah.
But where are your other
unnecessary
spend areas
evil.
besides vets?
Vets. I would say vet is definitely our biggest one, but medicines, I mean, if you want to say that's a separate thing, because like in the case of Serafina, she needed her meds were compounded and had like a 14-day shelf life. So we had to we were constantly getting her refills done by a compounding pharmacy, because it was cheaper than doing it through the vet. So we do utilize compounding pharmacies for some stuff. We've got a couple of dogs who were on there's a drug for I think it's for the heart, for like heart conditions. It's called Vetmedin, and it's very expensive when you buy like the brand, but you can get it compounded at a compounding pharmacy. And it's called like Pimbotin or something. It's a human drug too, and they will compound the tablets, and so we can get like 96 tablets for $10 instead of 30 days of tablets for $60. So we'll compound and use compounding pharmacies to help us out with medication costs, especially if it's like a recurring prescription for a dog. We have a lot of dogs with kidney disease, and so they have to be on kidney diets, and that food is much work. So I would say that kind of stuff where food can be expensive. If there's no prescription food needed, our foster homes actually cover the cost of food for us. So if they've already got dogs, they just kind of transition. There's no dietary issues. They'll just transition the foster over to what they're feeding their dogs. Makes it easier for them if they feed all the same thing. And that's like a little donation, they give to us for having the dog.
Are there any supply donations that are actually useful?
Great question.
I would
like
say,
you think about people just like, oh, I want to help, but I don't have the bandwidth. Can I? But I just wonder, is this stuff actually even useful?
We sometimes get people who want to donate, like maybe their last dog they're ever gonna have passed away. And in the case of Italian Greyhounds, most owners have like full wardrobes for their dogs. So they've got lots of clothes, right? Or beds, and they love blankets and beds. And so an owner could have one dog and they might have 5 or 6 beds, right? And they're good quality, right? And they'll go, oh, I've got all this stuff for my dog I no longer have, and they want to donate. And I'm like, well, you live in some remote area of Ohio, and I don't, all foster homes have all of those kinds of things already. So sometimes I'll just say, like, if you've got clothing, we'll take that, because in Ohio, like, we've always got dogs who could use sweaters or whatever, you know, when it's cold out. I think our other regions that are typically warmer through the year, they just won't take any of that kind of stuff. There was this was like maybe 10 years ago, there was a pet store in Columbus that was going out of business, and they'd already done the liquidation, but they had a ton of stuff still. So they reached out to some local rescues, and one of them was us. And they said, hey, come on this Saturday on this day, because after this, like, everything's going to the dump, and whatever you want, you can have. And so I have a volunteer who lived locally who's like, I'll go and I'll just grab a bunch of stuff. And so we ended up getting like beds and belly bands, which, Sarah, now you know what belly bands are.
I'm all about, I'm the belly band girl.
Dog bowl, toys, you know. So her basement, the storage closet in her basement in her house just became our storage unit, kind of, for that kind of stuff. And if we ever had a dog that came into Columbus, and sometimes they do come, especially if it's a shelter transfer, they have nothing on their back, right? Nothing but the clothes on their back. They have nothing. So there might be no collars or leashes or harnesses or beds or toy. So we'll pull from that little stash we've had, and it's lasted us like 10 years. So I really don't, our region doesn't really need that kind of stuff, because our foster homes already kind of have it available for foster dog use. Or I've got, you know, I'm thankful I've got this, you know, storage closet full of stuff we had donated a few years ago, but it's lasted us a long time. I would say, like, if rescues need anything, like, prescription food is like sealed, right? So especially if it's canned, there's always a rescue who could probably take kidney food, because it's expensive. And any dog that's over 6 or 7 or 8 years old probably has kidney disease. So I would say, if you've got food left over, you know, from something like that, then yeah, reach out to your local shelter. You know, they would be happy to take it off your hands too. But not too much in donations when it comes to physical things, because it's hard with Italian Greyhounds. Even taking clothes, they all come in different sizes. So I could have a bunch of clothes and I might not have any dogs that fit it. So then I'm holding on to stuff, and then my volunteers are holding on to stuff. It's like, so I kind of got away from taking physical things like that, because, well, it's just, you know, we don't have endless space, you know, to house, and because we're foster home based and not centralized like a Humane Society or county shelter, I've got my foster homes all over. So even trying to get something from point A to point B like that is a little difficult. And so, for the most part, unless it's local, like where a foster home can use it, I usually say no, because it's just, we just can't use it, or it's you know, unnecessary, or would create too much extra work.
I have one more question. Just going back to, so how do you scour all of the, like how do you find all the Iggy's everywhere?
So a lot of times we see Iggy's show up on Craigslist, and you can create recurring searches in different areas. So we have one volunteer, and I've known her for like 15 years. She works out of our Florida Gulf Coast region. And she was just at first an adopter, and then she became a foster home and like other kind of volunteer. And then she was like, hey, I can do this she was doing it for Gulf Coast. So she set up like searches for the 4 states that our Gulf Coast area covered. And she's like, hey, I can set this up for the whole country. So she did. So she monitors now everything that comes through Craigslist. And so it could be, I mean, Craigslist isn't like you selling animals. A lot of people will list their post as rehoming. So she catches, she's got all kinds of keywords that she catches, but if she sees one in any particular state, Ohio included, she'll send it to me and we'll reach out. I would say 90% of the time it's actually some just selling a dog and calling it rehoming. And they're not actually, in a traditional sense rehoming it, because they're wanting to get paid, and we don't pay for dogs. So
Right.
once in a while, I'm able to convince someone from Craigslist to surrender their dog for nothing, but for the most part, they want to be paid, and it's because they're selling and they're not really rehoming. But we keep a watch on it just in case, because you never know, So we
But
reach out
do
to
you watch the
everybody.
shelters too?
Because we have such good relationships with them, they reach out to us when they get one. So
Okay.
9 times out of 10, they don't want to keep one in house because, again, like they don't do well
Yeah.
in those kind of settings anyways. And so they know we have foster homes. So they'll go, hey, we got this dog in, we got to wait for the stray hold to be up or something like that, in case it was a stray pickup or something. And as soon as the stray hold is up, they put what's called a rescue hold on the dog. And then as soon as the stray hold is up, we come and pick them up. So,
Got it.
yeah, but I mean, we've come across some really interesting situations, even transport wise, like who pays for the cost of that? Our transport volunteers cover the gas. They don't ask us to be reimbursed for that kind of stuff. And I would say the most interesting situations I've had over the last few years is one was personally my own dog, Kita. I adopted a Whippet, who kind of came into IG Rescue as an Iggy, but it was very clear once we picked her up from the shelter that she was a Whippet, not an Iggy. But we'd already committed ourselves to her, so we just took her in anyways. And then I fell in love with her, so I ended up adopting her myself. Well, she was too big to fly in the cabin in a crate.
Right.
So, and I was like, I'm not putting you in cargo. I would never do that. So there's an organization, they're also a 501 called Pilots and Paws. And
Oh yeah.
basically people who have their own planes and who like to get airtime and they want to do something good at the same time. So they work with us or with Pilots and Paws, but they'll also work with like all kinds of stuff too. So like when Hurricane Katrina, they got really involved with the shelters that were in Louisiana and flew a bunch, got all the shelters cleared out and flew dogs to other states, so they could be fostered somewhere else. So I ended up using them to plan Kita's transport. It ended up being 6 pilots that flew a total of 15 hours to get her from Ohio to me in the Seattle area. And they just did little chunks. And so I'm thankful too in Ohio. I have 2 pilots and they have their own companies. They do their own thing, but they also have small personal planes. And they've done transports for me within Indiana and Ohio up to Michigan, out to Pennsylvania, and then down into Kentucky, like where it's deeper, where I might have to have like 5 or 6 cars doing a transport. Instead, they'll just do the whole route, and we'll just meet at airports. So I'm very thankful that I've got creative ways that we can do transports, not just by car. So it's and they never ask. I mean, thankfully they don't ask us for reimbursement on their jet fuel, because that would be
that would be
horrendous.
Break the bank.
Well, as followers of the show, and Sarah will certainly laugh when I say this, but I have seen a number of videos of those people doing the dog transports on my TikTok and YouTube.
Oh yeah. It's very interesting and entertaining sometimes to see it all. But it's like, because we're all volunteers, right? And so again, I couldn't do literally one thing that I do if I didn't have my network, of transporters and fosters. And I've got people who just want to help with the back end stuff, like processing applications. And our volunteer, like for foster homing and our adoption app, they're basically identical. So if you get approved for one, you're usually approved for the other. If you end up wanting to adopt a dog, later or something like that, you've already gone through the whole thing. So thankfully there's not too much more to do. But yeah, we want to get to know you. So I had one person, this was right when we made our application from a paper app to an online app in Ohio. And she still wanted it printed. So I printed it to a PDF, but because we allowed like so much room and space for someone to write or type into the sections of the questions, it was like 3 questions per page with like enough room for each one. And so the application became like 12 pages, and it really wasn't, I mean, there's not that many questions, but because of the spacing, that's just how it was. Well, I sent her the application as a PDF, and she emails me back like 5 minutes later and says, I'd rather sit on a cactus than fill this thing out. I just want to adopt a dog. And I'm like, thank you first. Thank you for making this easy for me, because if you can't spend 10 minutes
Yeah.
answering a few questions, then you're not the right person, or we're not the right rescue for you is
Yeah.
really how I list. I say you're not right for us if we're not right for you. But we want to get to know someone. So that's why we
Yeah.
ask questions, right? And then we do the reference checks. And very rarely have we ever had someone put a reference where the reference actually was bad. Thankfully. It does happen though, and so we're thankful, right, that people do list
Yeah.
references. And the same thing with the vet stuff. We've had vets tell us like, yeah, do not adopt, like they do not take care of the health of their pet at all. They're always declining this or that, even like basic of things. And so we're like, okay, well, if they're doing that with their own dogs, we don't want, if
Yeah.
a dog that came to us already had like veterinary neglect in their first home, we don't want to have that happen again. So, we can be discerning, but our matching is the same. My responsibility isn't to applicants. My
Right.
responsibility is to the dog, right? So I'm
Yeah.
not going to put a dog in a situation or a home that would revert to the exact same situation or home it had come from. So sometimes we get people who go, well, I want to adopt, or I got approved to adopt now I want this dog that I saw online, on our website or something. And I'm like, that's not the dog for you. They might like it because it's the same color as the one that passed away, or they just think the personality is cute, but without thinking, am I going to be a good home for that dog based on that
Yeah.
dog's personality? So we kind of match the other way. And it works the same way for foster homing too, is I want to make sure that I'm paying attention, and we all do this, all the reps do this. We're paying attention to the behaviors and personalities and needs of the dog, and then we find the right home for the dog. So someone might be approved and they might be waitlisted because we don't have a that matches them based also what they're looking for. So we won't just, because like when you go to a shelter and you apply and half hour later and $75 you're
Yeah.
walking out with a dog that you know nothing about, right? Their return rate is very high because
Yeah.
it has to be that way because they have so much volume of dogs coming in, animals coming in and out of their shelter all the time. They're always at capacity. So they adopt out really fast. Well, we'll have dogs stay with us if they have to for a year until we find the right home for them.
Yeah.
And that might be a year because maybe there's medical stuff going on that we're also addressing in that time. But I'd rather find the right home for a dog, and then that's their forever home. Like there's no situation that would have that dog come back to us. And so we take a little bit more time in that way, but it always ends up being the best course, for the dog. Cause again, that's who we're responsible for, not someone and their feelings.
So we are just at about time. So Heather, we're going to close out with a quick lightning round.
Okay.
So we'd like to have you say the first word or phrase that comes to mind for each of these questions.
Okay.
One thing every adopter should know.
Low expectations. Have low expectations.
One thing every foster should know.
Have low expectations.
All right. One thing every volunteer should know.
It's cyclical. Like you may have stuff to do all the time, and there might be months where there's nothing for you to do. And so don't take that personal. It's just this business is cyclical sometimes, so it's nothing personal.
Most misunderstood part of dog rescue.
I would say potty training. That's usually the number one thing surrendering owners tell us about is they can't get a handle on the potty training. And so I would say that's probably the most thing that gets misunderstood is how time consuming, and you just have to be consistent. You find what works for the dog and then you be consistent, but a lot of people want to do it their own way and it doesn't work.
And then finally, where can people learn more or support your rescue?
So they could find out more info about my region that I cover, Ohio and Michigan State. Our website is igrescueohio.org. You can also go to igrescue.com, and that is our main rescue. And you can also go on there and it tells you how to contact the different reps by state. So you can search by state and it'll tell you how to get in contact with the correct rep too if you live somewhere else.
Okay, and we'll drop all of that in the show notes so you can go in and easily click through to any of those links that Heather mentioned. Well, Heather, we have gone over an hour today.
That's a new record.
And I feel like there's still lots of stories that we could circle back. And Dr. E, I feel like you've got some untold adoption stories as well. So we may have to circle back and do a part 2 at some point.
Yes, and Heather, I just want to say thank you for being willing to do this. This was fascinating. And on behalf of Sarah and I, we're both going to make a joint donation to the Iggy Rescue.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, we wouldn't be around without our volunteers and fundraising and donations. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And absolutely thank you for having me on the show. It was a lot of fun.
All right. And that's the pod. We will be back next Wednesday.